represents her, or can she ask for a change at that point?
No, that I think was really thin in this case.
Were you surprised when Kirk Nurmi said, if anything, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you can convict her on manslaughter? He almost threw her under the bus a little bit at that point.
Well, no, Mark Victor did the same thing really successfully in his case. So, I think it was something that...
You think it was a smart move?
Yeah, yeah. It's probably the only thing, because they're realistic. They know that she's not going to walk away from this.
So any chance of her being acquitted, he knew that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, they knew that walking in. They were trying this case to save her life, and we'll see if they can do it.
Okay, and according to Arizona law, we're less than a minute away now. We're anxiously waiting word, and as soon as the jury is in and the judge is ready to read the verdict, we'll cut inside the courtroom to bring you that live. So have no fears. Keep it right here. We'll go inside as soon as that happens. But according to Arizona law, if she's convicted on murder one, there can be two types of murder one, and the jury can be split, right?
Yes, that's correct. They've also got her charged with felony murder, and they don't have to be unanimous on one or the other. It's just enough for felony murder. Now, there is a possibility on down the line, if she's convicted of murder one, that the jury finds no aggravating circumstances, and in that case, it's up to the judge, not the jury, to sentence her to either natural life or 25 years.
And that could happen in the sentencing phase?
That could happen later on down the line, if the jury finds no aggravating circumstance.
All right, and Lynn Sue, I know you're anxiously watching this in the studio along with Scott and Mark Victor. Any second now, we should have some sort of a conclusion to this 4-month intensely emotional trial of Jodi Arias. While we wait to go inside the courtroom, do you guys have anything to add?
Well, we were just asking Mark Victor if they're probably going to be on time, and he went, no. So it could be a little bit longer. We are thinking 1:30, 1:32. We just don't know how much longer this is going to take. But Mark, I did want to ask you something, because Mark Curtis was talking about the fact that the jury is made up of 8 men and 4 women, and the men might be less likely to convict.
Hey, Lynn Sue, let me jump in here one second.
Sure.
We're learning from the control room here. The media is being escorted into the courtroom right now, so we're probably just a couple of minutes away.
Okay, so good. Maybe we are going to be closer to being on time. But my question is, do the jurors, are they polled on their opinion about the death penalty before they are even impaneled? And are they asked, as men, would you be less likely to send a woman?
Yeah, way back in the jury selection phase, right before the trial even got started with any evidence, there was this huge process, and there may have been jury questionnaires, I suspect there were in this case, where there's a whole host of various biases that are sort of ferreted out of the selection process. One of those biases in a death penalty case is, and I don't want to say we, because as defense attorneys we're never looking for this, but the state is looking for people, and they have a right to do this, who would say, look, even if there was an aggravating factor found in a first-degree murder case, I still wouldn't give the death penalty. In other words, under no circumstances would I give the death penalty. I'm morally opposed. And so we call that death qualifying the jury. If somebody says that, it's a no questions asked, there's no argument about it, the judge will just simply excuse that person. So if somebody is morally opposed to the punishment that is authorized by Arizona law, then they're off the jury. But some it may have been Mel McDonald. I was on with him a couple of days ago, and Mel said, look, it's not like this is an even playing field. The defense was starting 10 yards back in the end zone with all 11 people rushing at them. And people need to understand that. This thing isn't an even sort of soccer game or something. Isn't an even the facts sort of soccer game or something. Very much against the defense. And everybody knows that, and it's true that they ought to be. By this point in the game, what you've got is police officers who think that Jodi Arias committed a crime. There are charging attorneys who think that that she committed the crime. Then there's a probable cause determination either by a judge or a grand jury. They have to think that there's probable cause. Then the defense attorney has had an opportunity to sort of beat up the case, knock out evidence. So by the time you've gotten to trial, it really ought to be a very strong case for the state. And indeed, if you look at the verdicts in Maricopa County or across our state, the vast majority of them are guilty, and they really ought to be, because if there's a problem with the case gets resolved early on with a plea.
But you never know what's going to happen. Take the Casey Anthony case.
Sure.
What do you think would happen if something like that happened in this case?
I hope they have security standing by just in case, because, you know, it's not just a matter of justice for Travis. This is a matter of justice for all of us. This is our system on trial, and I like the fact that the world is looking at our justice system here in Arizona, and I think on this day we look pretty good regardless of what the verdict comes.
And you know what, speaking of the crowd is getting bigger and bigger. In fact, let's take you back out live outside the courthouse, and we'll rejoin Mark Curtis and Mike Black.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott. I was just talking to Mike about what would happen if this jury comes back with the unexpected verdict, and somehow, and I don't think it'll happen in a million years, but somehow she's acquitted, or even manslaughter, which would I think the court would erupt with that. Have you ever been in a situation like that?
I have. Years ago, I represented a young man who was alleged to have murdered a Maricopa County Sheriff's deputy, and the verdict came in, and of course it was unfavorable to me, and the courtroom just went crazy. They were clapping and whistling that my client got convicted, and my client got convicted, and the judge had the very same
Mike, hang on a second. I just want to cut you off and just mention to our viewers that Chris Williams has been seated in the courtroom. The media is now in there, so and at any moment we'll be cutting away to the jurors' decision. Jurors 5 and 8, I'm being told, are now in the courtroom and seated, so they're slowly filling up into their respective slots, so it's just a matter of minutes. We'll take you inside the very second this happens. Go ahead, Mike.
Anyway, in this case where my client was alleged to have murdered the sheriff's deputy, his family and a bunch of sheriff's deputies were hooting and hollering, and the judge blew a cork, had the very same Maricopa County sheriff's deputies that this fellow worked with drag him out of the courtroom, so it's kind of scary.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear it over there, but the people are slowly starting to chant behind us. Garrett, can you get a shot of that? There's a bunch of people assembled here on the steps along with all the media waiting for word on the verdict. And when I mentioned just a second ago, Mike, jurors 5 and 8, of course, they were the jurors that had been dismissed. They're in the courtroom waiting to see what happens. Obviously, they feel that they have a vested interest in this trial, even though they were dismissed from the jury. But slowly but surely, the jurors will start making their way in there. If the jurors 5 and 8, the former jurors, are seated, I've got to imagine the jurors will be coming in there at any second. And of course, we will cut you away to that. There are two possible phases that the jury that is in place will go through once the verdict is announced, whether it's first-degree murder or something else. And I want to ask you about that, Mike. We have the punishment phase and the aggravation phase, and the aggravation phase is first. What's that all about?
That is, that's specifically before a trial begins. The state's obligated to file a notice of a death penalty and to file what particular aggravating circumstances there are. There are 14 delineated circumstances in the death penalty statute. For example, one is if you do it for pecuniary gain. For example, if you murder someone because there's a life insurance policy, something like that. This will be very short. He may just put the pathologist on. It is unlikely the defense would call anybody, so the aggravation phase is going to be relatively short. Then the penalty phase comes, and that's where they can put on all sorts of evidence. The state can put on evidence about the impact it had on the victims, and the defense could bring in things that happened to her earlier in her life.
Are we talking about a couple of weeks, do you think?
I don't think that long, but certainly 4 or 5 days as to that.
Okay, and that could start, what, tomorrow, Friday?
Yeah, my assessment is the judge is going to give them a day off or so, start the aggravation phase perhaps Monday, and then go right in from the aggravation phase to the penalty phase as to what they're actually going to give her.
Okay, apparently Jodi's attorneys are now in place in the courtroom, but there's no sign of Jodi Arias. Is that unusual?
No, they'll bring her in. She's probably
Is she the last
lunch.
one in?
Yeah, that's all. That always happens. She was probably eating lunch, and they have to bring her in from the cell block.
I admire her for being able to eat lunch at a moment like this. I don't think I'd be able to eat.
I don't know if she did or not, you know.
Yeah. And then if she gives him a couple of days off, is it possible that she could say, take the next few days off, come back Monday, and we'll start the aggravation phase and the penalty phase?
That's a distinct possibility. There's nothing, the statute says they're supposed to do it right away, but it usually never happens that way.
I want to mention that we're being told from Chris Williams, who's in the courtroom, that the courtroom is packed to capacity again. At any given second, the jury could come back with their verdict, and of course we'll cut to that live and then bring you reactions. So keep it here. We'll bring you the live verdict, and then we'll come back outside here for reactions from Mike Black and our panel of experts assembled here. I want to ask you, once we get to that phase, in the beginning, the burden of proof was on the state to prove that she was guilty. Now does the burden of proof fall on the defense to try to save her life?
Yeah, well, it depends on which phase you're talking about. In the aggravation phase, the state has to prove the aggravators beyond a reasonable doubt, and the defense has to prove any mitigation by a preponderance of the evidence. It's a lesser standard. So the burden shifts a bit, and then at the penalty phase, the burden remains the same. And so if we get to that.
So the burden would still be on Juan Martinez, or would it be on the defense?
No, the burden is on Juan Martinez in the aggravating phase to prove those aggravators beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense only has to prove their mitigators if there are anybody but a preponderance of the evidence. If the jury doesn't find any aggravators, that's the end of the case. There's no punishment phase.
And somewhere over the course of the next week or so, before it's all said and done, and before they announce what her penalty and punishment will be, whether it's death or years and years in prison, at some point, Travis Alexander's family will be able to come before the jury and speak, and also Jodi Arias will be able to speak, correct?
In the punishment phase, if they get there. So if they find an aggravator, they'll move into that phase, and there'll undoubtedly be representatives from both sides who speak to the jury.
And that's where Jodi would beg for her life, so to speak?
Well, have someone else do it for her. She could in effect testify at that, but she said all that she needs to say in the trial, and the jury can consider all of that evidence in the punishment phase.
So if you were her attorney, you wouldn't let her speak again?
No, I wouldn't do it.
You'd have someone else go up for her?
Right. She said literally all that she can say after 18 days on the stand. There's nothing that she could add.
And so she could actually damage herself?
I think so.
Okay, let's go to Judge Sherry Stevens live inside the courtroom. Live inside the courtroom. Live inside the courtroom. Live inside the courtroom. Live inside the courtroom.
And what you're watching here
record the verdict. Impaneled and sworn, and the above entitled
State of
action
Arizona versus
upon our
Jodi
oaths do
Arias
find the
verdict
defendant as to
count
count
one.
one, first
We, the
degree
jury,
murder,
duly
guilty.
impaneled
And sworn, and the above entitled action upon our oaths do find the defendant as to count one, first degree murder, guilty. 5 jurors find premeditated, 0 find felony murder, 7 find both premeditated and felony. Signed, foreperson. Is this your true verdict, so say you want it all?
Ladies and gentlemen, the clerk is now going to ask each of you a question. Please answer yes or no.
Juror number 1, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 2, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 3, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 4, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 6, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 7, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 9, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 12, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 13, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 14, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 16, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 18, is this your true verdict?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the next phase of the trial will begin tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Please be here at 12:45. Between now and then, the admonition continues to apply. Do not speak about this case. Do not view any media about this case. Are there any questions? You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
You heard it, the jury unanimous in their guilty of first-degree murder for Jodi Arias. It sounds like, and Lynn Sue and Mark, Victor, you can jump in, but what we heard out here, it's rather loud, they were split between felony and first-degree premeditated. But Mike, either way, we're talking about the possibility of the death penalty now for Jodi Arias.
Yes, that's still there. They're going to move into the aggravation phase tomorrow. I would anticipate that that'll last tomorrow. And maybe a little bit into next week, but she certainly still can. The death penalty is now still on the table.
Okay, so real quickly, let's kind of lay this out for our viewers. What'll happen when they come back in?
Well, they'll come back in, and the state can give a little opening statement with regard to what they anticipate to prove with regard to the aggravation. They could put on perhaps a pathologist to talk about the cause of death. The defense could put on a pathologist also, or quite simply cross-examine them, and then you can give a closing argument, just like a mini trial, and the judge will instruct the jury as to what the aggravating circumstances are and the burden of proof, and then they'll go decide that. Then if they decide that there's an aggravator with no sufficient mitigating circumstances, then they move into the penalty phase, and the same process repeats itself.
And Mike, when they go back into that room for the penalty phase, have jurors told you in the past that they felt like the pressure was off of them, or is this just as intense as coming up with a verdict?
No, it's just as intense, because this
now
truly,
you're deciding